Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Planet ARK. Before we begin today's episode, I would like to remind you that I recently started a gaming review channel where I do video reviews on several games, both old and new. This channel is way more laid back, and won't have necessarily a new video every week, but maybe about 3 to 4 reviews per month. I recently added a new review, so if you are interested, please go have a look via the link to the Kanoa Reviews channel in the description. If you like what you see, please subscribe and share it with friends, and don't forget that you can also request certain reviews of games, both old and new, on the channel itself. In today's episode, we will travel far north, beyond the Scorched Isles, where blood was being spilled every day. Its high, snowy peaks can be seen from afar, greeting you with a friendly sight. Even seen from the Scorched Isles, a poisonous land where the ecosystem itself is broken as carnivores and predators fight for constant hunger and territory, the northern snowlands can be seen as a signal of hope. Among other small peninsulas, the northern snowlands is the smallest landmass near the actual Ark center, floating high in the air. Though the water here looks calm, it is quite treacherous, as the bottom suddenly falls from under you, showing nothing but a blue abyss without any sign of life. Not a single fish in sight. As one approaches the snowlands, sights and sounds could be noticed that were absent from the Scorched Isles. Large patches of green and lush trees, the sounds of birds and herds grazing along the tundra. It was here too where the edge of the center was located, with infinity waterfalls pinpointing the edge with sneaky drafts that would lead any creature to its doom who dare too close. Near the shore, where the grass was thick and the flowers bright, all accompanied by a cool temperature, we find our first sign of a friendly creature, the woolly rhino. One glance of this creature and one can understand just how heavy this animal is. It moves slowly as it searches for edible plants, as it needs to constantly feed to keep its energy supply up. Its warm winter coat protects it from the harsh temperatures, pretty much like any creature here. Though the horns on its nose make quite the impression, it is very rare that the woolly rhino will make an aggressive stance. Even if a fight breaks out close to it, the rhino often won't be bothered to flee, as its weight and size can be seen as protection itself. They are spread out all throughout the snowlands, including the pine forests. The horns are of course also used amongst battles to choose an alpha. Due to the sharp nature of the horn, more often than not, these battles will end with one of the two dying, or in the worst case, both succumbing to their wounds. Color-wise, there's not that much variation, especially in terms of their fur, as they have a red and brown color scheme. But the fact that more often than not the rhino will ignore conflict does not mean that this place is without its dangers. The Yutyrannus, a rare predator that can be only found in the coldest regions in the center location, is a creature that many believe is related to the Tyrannosaurus. Its feathers keep it warm in the same way the wool does for the rhino. Its snout is long and pointy, making its biting angle more ferocious than a T-Rex, though lacking in power. One of the most unique aspects of a Yutyrannus is that it can live in harmony amongst other carnivores. The Yutyrannus is highly aggressive and will attack almost anything. The shape of its skull partially is to explain the horrifying sound that eludes when it roars towards a certain opponent or prey. The sound is so hellish that most creatures will turn and run. This is where the fleeing animal has the advantage. The Yutyrannus is not the fastest creature, and it often lets its presence be known by roaring. It occurs often where an animal it chases gets away in the end. Other scenarios that can also happen is that the creature it chases runs into a bigger herd to lose it, and the Yutyrannus instead will attack and kill a weaker or slower member of that herd instead. In this case, the woolly rhino will not run, but instead seek confrontation. This here showcases the advantage that the theropod has over the woolly rhino, as its high stance makes it easy to bite the herbivore in places where it cannot protect itself. As the rhino tries to gorge the Yutyrannus, the predator is free to bite in its neck, back, or side and fatally wound it to eventually devour. Another creature that could be found here was the woolly mammoth. This animal would be one of the first to come up in people's minds when they think about cold prehistoric climates. The mammoth is perfectly made for this environment as well. Its wool coat protects it from the coldest temperatures and harshest winds. Much like the rhino, it needs to constantly graze to keep up with the energy output, though overall it moves very slowly. Part of this is because of its apparent and large tusks. The shape and form of the tusks can vary greatly, though they often have multiple pointy ends all over, which it uses to fend for itself. Sometimes the color of the tusks can even be different, as can the tusks grow so big that it becomes a nuisance for the mammoth to see in front of it. Its ears are significantly smaller than elephants we know nowadays, pointing out to an evolutionary advantage that these creatures needed over thousands and thousands of years to eventually become the way we're used to them. But even the mammoth knows enemies here. Though dinosaurs themselves are still quite rare, they can be found within the snowlands. A T-Rex is a rare sight, but is one of the few predators that can pose a threat to the mammoth. Battles between these two behemoths often take very long, and make the ground itself shake. The mammoth is a bit better protected than the rhino, as the position of the tusks makes it easy for the mammoth to move its head sideways or to the front to lash out at its enemy. It's much more difficult for the T-Rex to reach the mammoth's side, though its slow movement is used to the T-Rex's advantage. The battle is long and bloody, and both are exhausted and beat up in the end. But finally the mammoth succumbs to the hungry jaws of the mighty T-Rex. But what might surprise some others is that the mammoth also faces a nemesis that's about 1/5 of its size. Traces of battles fought can be found throughout the tundra. The direwolf might be the most dominant predator in the snowlands, not because they are so strong on their own, but because they hunt in packs, and sometimes these packs can be up to 6 or 7 high. Even something like a mammoth or T-Rex would stand no chance against that many direwolves. The direwolves themselves were not particularly sturdy, meaning that often members of the pack were killed during hunts, or would die later due to wounds sustained. But 4, 5, or even more jaws biting at you at a high rate would bring any large target to its knees to be finished off quickly. Even the Ankylosaurus, built to last and only weak at its bottom, stood no chance, as it died by 1,000 cuts like emperors did in them olden days. The packs would patrol the tundra in search of cadavers or prey in the distance. Their eyes were sharp and could spot something as little as a rabbit for a potential prey. Their constant hunts also required a lot of energy. And they were a lot more active than creatures like the mammoth and rhino. Therefore, they needed to constantly feed as well. Though unlike the Yutyrannus, they were not constantly aggressive. If their hunger was stilled, they would just patrol their territory and would leave other creatures like the nearby elks alone. If one were to ascend the rocks beyond the tundra, one would get to the peaks of the snowlands. Here, green was changed into white, and cold would take hold even more. It was more difficult to find life here, though once again, nature astounds us by showcasing creatures especially built for this environment. Join us next time, in the final episode of Planet ARK for this season, as we take a look at the peaks at the center and explore the mysterious small lake beyond, where animals live in a secluded environment unlike anywhere else. Don't forget to like and share this with others, as it does help the channel a lot. I will see you all on the next episode of Planet ARK.